right, hello.
Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hi.
how are you guys? Well, welcome to another episode of Free Range American. Right?
Free Range American.
I'm super excited for today's show. I mean, it's a long-time listener, first-time caller for me over here, you know?
Yeah, have you ever done a show with him?
Yeah.
Oh,
You
shoot.
have? You have? I can't remember.
I don't know.
I think we've done 2 with you, right? On Drinkin' Bros?
Yeah, I did one with
Yeah,
him.
You
I'm
did?
not.
Yeah.
One,
Yeah.
At least one, I'd hope. Maybe
Right.
not. I'm thinking about it.
But
And I'm
this
not
is
sure.
Dakota Meyer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the Medal of Honor recipient,
Right.
Marine, Dakota
Right.
Meyer. I mean, they share a learned skill. They're both snipers.
Ooh. Wow.
I didn't date Sarah Palin's kid, though, right? Is that Dakota Meyer? Or is
Are
that another
they
one?
married?
I don't remember.
Right.
Are they?
Anyway.
Anyway.
Snipers. But Alek is back because he has developing news. You know, major life changes.
Transitioning, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm
so,
always.
So yeah, tell us about your transition into politics.
Well, I'm transitioning to a
Yeah.
politician.
Yeah, you are. That's such an appropriate way to put that, too.
I'm still at the early stages. Fundraising.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have not. I mean, obviously, you have not gone full politician because you're not talking like one yet.
Not yet. I think you have to be elected. I'm still a candidate at this point.
Right.
At the early stages.
Yeah, so when do you start turning into a douchebag? Is that later?
I think that's after you're in for a minute.
Oh, right.
I mean,
I hung out with Crenshaw this morning.
No, yeah, he's an exception.
And he's still okay, but I
Yeah.
think it's because he's still in his first term.
Right.
Give him a couple more years, then we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to imagine, like, it's just like, I imagine it's just like anything that we've kind of encountered in our lives. You know, when you have kind of a concept in your head of what the House of Representatives or the Senate is like,
Right.
you know, and then you get there and you realize, oh, we have to play this game. You know, power moves when you're put on committees, and you know, as you gain.
Well, you have the party, right? So you have
momentum.
party politics.
Yeah,
It's probably
And
tough
then-
because everybody's out to get you too.
Right.
Even, regular people. Everybody either hates you or likes you, and it's just tough probably trying to talk like a politician and still get your message across. I don't
Why? Like, why do you want to do it? It's like,
know.
why?
Ooh, well, this is probably going to bore people to death,
Yeah,
but
great.
basically southwestern Oregon relies on the timber industry, and
Right.
since the timber industry went away, it's been really hard on people economically. You've got unemployment, homelessness, even we have some of the highest child abuse rates in the country. So everything's really gone downhill since timber left,
Mm-hmm.
and I really want to bring it back. Not really for the timber industry, but just for the people of southwestern Oregon, because it's like taking away West Virginia's coal industry,
Right.
or I don't know, cattle industry in Texas.
So you legitimately have been researching kind of the health of the populace in your region and found reasons why it has gone down, and now you want to fix that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the incumbent Democrat, he's been in office for 33 years, and he hasn't done anything for the district. He's pretty much overseen the downfall of the timber industry and has done nothing for us. And he's in a position to where he could do a lot for the district, and he just doesn't. And it makes me mad that we're in this situation economically purely for political reasons. It's not because, we don't need timber anymore. It's not because all the timber burned up and went away, although it's starting to. And it's just political reasons that people are living the way they're living in southwestern Oregon.
Mm-hmm. And what district is that? Or
Congressional District 4.
okay. And then how many congressional districts are there in Oregon?
5. So we're a little bit behind Texas, but
Got it.
we're stealing a couple of Californias, I think.
Good. Yeah. I mean,
That's
more.
that's a good thing.
And then what city is that? Like, where are you at?
So it's
city
like
population.
Albany, Corvallis. Like Corvallis is where Oregon State is, and kind of in the middle of it is Roseburg and Eugene, which is where the University of Oregon is.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's pretty much all of southwestern Oregon.
So, I mean, you're fighting a pretty pitched battle, I would imagine, because you have a really, when I would say you're on the west side of Oregon, and Eugene. When I hear town names like Eugene, I think, whoa, way left, way left. So, Like, you got to have a game plan, obviously. Like, this is about getting people out to vote, basically.
Yeah.
It's getting people out to vote to outnumber the other.
Yeah, it's about winning the middle, really. It's
Yeah.
common sense issues that people care about that maybe even aren't that political.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, Eugene is very liberal, but the rest of the district is very conservative, and so it's very competitive. Trump only lost the district by 500 votes. It's the closest district that he actually lost.
Wow.
And basically, I mean, we're just trying to lead on timber, veterans issues, the Second Amendment, issues that most people care about.
Right.
The incumbent is pretty much a socialist. He co-founded the House Progressive Caucus with Bernie Sanders, and he co-sponsored the Green New Deal with AOC. So he's gotten way far left for how moderate the district is.
And is that going to be part of your strategy, is to exploit kind of, I mean, it's pretty, sounds like he did it for you, you know?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's just tough because Republicans aren't very organized in Oregon, so kind of getting started is very tough. I mean, that's part of the reason why we're out in Texas fundraising and gathering support. But I mean, I just think that if you can lead on issues that people care about, the average person, not even someone that's that politically informed, you can win the middle and win an election even in Western Oregon.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I mean, I follow politics relatively closely. I mean, I probably more so than most people. So I think that's kind of a fair stance to talk about some of those issues. And I don't know how the entire district's broken up, but I think when I think about it from the outside looking in, I would say, it's going to be tough with Eugene, right? Sitting there, because that's kind of.
But you've ran for a seat in Eugene.
Have you?
No, I ran for a seat in Douglas County, which is
so
Roseburg,
county.
where I live.
All right.
And so I'm not going in politically ignorant, I would say. I mean, I know it's a very dirty business and do a lot of personal
But your name
attacks,
has been out there in this area enough.
I mean, a lot of people know who I am because of the terrorist attack on the train and things like that, and that definitely helps.
Right.
But I mean, at the end of the day, people care about the issues and what you're running on, and I think our issues are hopefully common sense enough for most people.
Well, it sounds like you're focused on things that actually affect people's lives, whereas these days a lot of politicians are focusing on this divide mongering, or these issues. Everybody stems from immigration to abortion, and it's like, are those really things that everybody wakes up every day and is concerned with?
Well, and they're not popular issues. I mean, they're very divisive issues, I guess I would say, with the timber industry and just timber in Western Oregon. It's even with the environmentalists, even their argument doesn't really hold a lot of water, because they allow forest fires to happen, and then after a forest fire, they won't even allow timber companies to come in, cut the trees that are burned down, and plant new, healthy, young trees. They just let the forest sit there and rot until it comes back naturally, and it's just not very efficient. It's not good for the environment. It dumps carbon into the atmosphere, and then the trees sit there and rot and dump more carbon into the atmosphere after a forest fire. So I don't even understand the environmentalists' argument on that subject, I guess. But I mean, at the end of the day, I just want people to look at the timber issue and make up their own mind. I don't know. It just makes me mad that nobody's doing anything about the issue. This has been a problem for almost 30 years, and it's taking me to run for office to try to change it. Mm-hmm. And it should not take that long.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Idaho. My dad was a logger, so I've heard it, right? So I've heard the arguments, I think, my entire life, where the environmentalists are the forest needs to return to its natural state, right? That's their whole shtick is the wilderness, the forest needs to return to its natural state, and they don't want any human intervention. What they really want to do is just kind of put a fence up, protect it. Nobody can go in there. They don't want trails. Like the hardcore environmentalists, you shouldn't even have a trail in there to go in there and go bird watching. Right, that's like far left, which is almost an anti-human position, where they're like, humans are disgusting animals, they ruin everything, we should all die. That's essentially their position, and the earth needs to return to its non-human existence. Okay, but
Well, that's not going to happen.
right. That's my whole point. Okay, so now that we know like what the other side is like, that's where their position is. We're gonna have to dial it back. Like, you can't go back from like humans exist.
There's only more of us coming.
There's only more of us coming.
Yes, that position works in a fantasy world. You know, when there's.
But I think that's where I'm getting to this. It's like these are
Yeah.
fantasies that people have. That,
also a timeline too that isn't even within our lifetime. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
And if you do just let it sit, it's just going to burn up every year. And I mean, we have people living in areas that are wooded. I mean, you don't want to see another paradise happen. You don't want, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
now
You
is it
can't-
the environmental activists that have caused the timber industry to leave Oregon? Is that the cause? Like,
Well, they haven't left completely, but yes, they have moved a lot, especially to the southeast. They haven't given up completely, but I mean, they're still closing lumber mills even in this economy, which really doesn't make any sense. We're importing.
so is that
timber
is that
from Canada.
legislation? Is that legislation?
Yes,
for
that's
it
what
is.
I'm curious.
Yes,
So
it is.
what type of legislation have they passed that is?
Well, it's mostly the Endangered Species Act. That's what they
yeah.
used to kill timber in the late 80s and early 90s.
Right.
The spotted owl
Mhm.
was going away, and they couldn't figure out why. They figured
Right.
it must be the timber industry, and come to find out, it had nothing to do with how much we were logging, because it still hasn't come back. It was a invasive species of owl that was basically killing them off.
Right.
And now we know that, and they
Right.
still haven't adjusted their timber policy.
I'll tell you what I don't need in my day-to-day life is a spotted owl.
I've never even seen one.
Yeah. You know what I do need?
Yeah, timber,
Toilet paper.
wood.
I do need toilet paper every day.
I do need 2x4s.
I do need-
and fencing.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
yeah. Don't
And
see
wood
an owl
grain paneling
having,
on my
I don't
SUV.
understand. Like,
That's
this argument
that's
is
a
just
must.
invalid. You know?
I
Species
think
come
that
and go. You know, they come and go.
I think that's the point, though, right? Which is like there's one half, or at least a subsection of the United States. They truly believe, they're anti-American, anti-human, anti. Like they're really self-loathing humans. They don't want anything to do with humanity, and they don't live in the real world where they're like, hey, we're going to have to coexist.
Well, and timber's a renewable resource.
Exactly.
How much
It
has
grows back.
It grows back.
How much has
And I love logging roads too, because it makes it easier for me to get into the backcountry to kill delicious things like elk.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about this. It's like, how many times has the desert tortoise thwarted our exercises throughout our military career? This desert tortoise,
the desert tortoise,
the cactus,
yeah, there's another woodpecker.
yeah, the woodpecker. That's at Fort Bragg.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, like I love clean air. Like I love
Yes.
clean air. I respect the environment. I love being out in the wilderness and experiencing the wilderness for everything that it has to offer. But to your point, letting it just burn every year or every 5 years on cycles with no roads, no sustainability in the harvest, these are non-starting conversations to me. We have more elk right now in the lower 48 than we did in like 1950. Based on proper management, we have more whitetail, we have more elk, we have more game in the United States, and that comes from hunting. So it's kind of the same thing from the anti-hunters. They're like, you guys are out just killing all the animals and running the buffalo off cliffs. And
Well, the original conservationists were hunters. They
Exactly.
wanted to preserve the animals so that they could continue to hunt them in the future. It's the same thing with the timber industry. The private companies have a motivation to keep the forest healthy and growing.
Correct.
The federal government does not. And the federal government, controlling these lands from D.C. does not really make much sense because they're not out in the woods every day. They're back in D.C. telling Oregon basically what they can do with their forests.
How does this, from a complete layman's perspective, how does this industry operate? Like, are these companies buying large plots of land and then foresting them, or is this BLM land that they're paying a stipend to the state itself in order to harvest? Like, how does this work?
It's a little bit of both. There is private and there is federally owned land. The private land is what's managed properly
right.
and cut after it's burnt. It's the federal land that's the problem. It's the federal land where they dialed back logging dramatically about 25, 30 years ago. And that's the real problem, because a lot of forest fires, because it's so mismanaged, forest fires will start on federal land, get large, and then spread to all the private land surrounding it. And so it really hurts everybody. But it's a federal problem. It's the federal land that's being mismanaged and not being, like I said, logged after a fire and replanted. They just let it sit, which increases the chance of it reburning. And I mean, I could talk about timber for days, but you know, I mean, I'm also running on other issues that people across the country care about, like veterans issues. The Second Amendment obviously is very important to me due to what we survived on the train. I mean, shoot, even 6 weeks after the train attack, there was a shooting at my college. 6 days after the shooting at my college, Spencer was stabbed in a bar fight in Sacramento. And my little brother offered to loan him his Glock, and he didn't take it because it was illegal to conceal carry in California.
Right.
And then he was stabbed another 6-7 times in a bar fight. Just, I mean, the Second Amendment is just, I think everybody should have the right to protect themselves. I think they should be able to own whatever gun they want. And, I mean, shoot, everybody should, I mean, we have the Second Amendment for a reason. It's in the Constitution. They want to have socialized medicine and give everybody free medical care and force the rest of America to pay for it and do away with the Second Amendment. And it's, I mean, we have a choice this election between basically freedom and socialism. I mean, the choices have, I hate when people say, you know, this election's the most important in history, because they say that every 2 or 4 years. But I don't think the choices have ever been more clear, especially after seeing what President Trump has done with the economy and delivering on the promises that he made when he was running. And now we have people on the other side basically asking for outright socialism. I mean, the choice is pretty clear in my mind, and I hope the choice is clear to most Americans that socialism would not be good for this country. I mean, just look at how the government runs things. Look at how the government runs the VA, and you want the entire United States to run on a VA-like system. It just does not seem like a good idea to me.
The DMV, that's a good example. That's government ran. Yeah. And it runs like a Swiss watch.
Well, I there's so many things you touched on, right? It's kind of like, where do we start with this? Like deconstructing this decision between socialism, and even if we're talking about socialism and a democratic republic within a capitalist economy, there's a lot of different things that we can unpack. And like, I think a lot of these things, they kind of boil down to what you said really early in that, which is there's a big section of our country, and they want to lobby up these issues and have the federal government control what happens locally. And, you know, as a conservative, I think more people need to look at this, I think, across the board, you know, as conservatives and liberals alike. Do you want more control over what happens in your town, your community, your state? Do you believe in that? Because if you believe in that fundamental, you know, this is a local and state issue, and we want more control and more autonomy, and we don't want the federal government involved in our lives, you're conservative. And when we looked at it from, you know, the marijuana issue, I think is probably the most glaringly obvious point I love to point out to liberals. Like, do you like your use of marijuana? Oh yeah, it's great. You know, it's great. I'm like, great.
You want your state to have the right.
You want your state to be able to decide that? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
You're a conservative. You're a conservative.
But that's and I think that's where people get lost with the principle of this. If California wants to ban all guns and they want to let, you know, homeless people shit in the streets or whatever the fuck it is that they want to do,
I think,
they could do that.
I think San Francisco should do a gun buyback program and then let the homeless people shit on all the guns in San Francisco.
Yeah.
That would be a great thing for them to do. But
that's the thing is if that's what they want to do with that state, great. Now we don't know where we want to live.
I think it's a step further, though. Like, I think it's like, we have to drive the independence, like the independent decisions, down to your town, your county. These are issues that we just don't need the federal government getting greatly involved in our lives. And I hate this persistence from one side of our country, and conservatives do it too. They're always like, lob this up to the Fed.
Well,
the Fed has
there's
to do
big
it. The
government
Fed has to do it.
conservatives too, and I mean,
Yes.
I just think you just have to look at what has the government done well,
Right.
and it's
Not much.
next to nothing. I mean, the government does not do a whole lot of things well. I mean, you could argue the military, and I think a strong military is important, but even the military, they do it at an incredible cost. I mean, nothing.
Efficiency is not a DOD thing.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing where it's like when you're lobbing these things up to their federal national issues, national security, national issue, right? National issue, the national healthcare program. Man, that's a tough one for me. Like, do I believe there should be some type of federally instituted healthcare system? To a certain degree, yeah. There's some socialist tenets to that for me when I look at it, because I do think that, kids, for instance, like no kid should go without healthcare. Like no kid should go without healthcare. But for me, I can't have my cake and eat it too on some of these issues. I can't be, a small government footprint. I'm going to have to sacrifice some of what I want in order to maintain autonomy and freedom at the individual level. And I think for conservatives, me more as like a libertarian conservative than I am a traditional conservative, I think those are the things that I have to you have to forfeit some things to have what your main principle is.
Well, the thing that makes me mad too is just how much government spends and wastes.
Correct.
If we cut out government waste and spending on stupid programs and research projects, we could have money to pay for everyone's health care under 18 if we wanted to. There's just so much waste in government, and that's why I think conservatives don't believe in government, is because government never does anything efficiently.
Yeah, but I think he just rooted the true problem with both sides is rather than you've got one side, you got Bernie Sanders saying healthcare for all, you've got the red side saying no, fuck that. Rather than coming in and going, hey, what about healthcare for all under 18? Are we happy with that? Are you happy with that? Are you happy with that? Like start posing an idea that meets in the middle.
There's a lot of people out there. Like I listen to a lot of conservative radio, and I think that there's a lot of middle ground conservatives out there. There really is. The problem is like the left is so fucking left. Like what I don't like is
they constantly
I don't
try
like
and out-left
pulling
each other.
I don't like pulling the right left. I don't like it. Like I like, far right is, and when I look at like there's more control, there's less control, right? Big government, either you're left or you're right, and when you're big government, more control, I'm not a fan. When you're either conservative or liberal, and you're always trying to lobby things up and have more control over people on a national level, just not a fan of anything that goes that way. So at the Second Amendment, I'm fine with local municipalities and cities to say, hey, you want to not have guns? Great. Move out of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Like,
now we
who
just
cares?
know the people
But-
that disagree with that don't have to live there.
Right. And I think that that's where people are like, oh, well, you don't support the Second Amendment. I do. But I can't, as a true conservative, I can't
Force your
compromise
opinions down other people's
Yeah,
throats.
I don't want to force it. So if a local city says, we don't want this, and they voted it in place, I got to say, like, hey, man, I'll move out of the city. I'll go somewhere else. I don't like it on a state level. You know what I mean? I don't like that on the state level, and I definitely do not want that conversation on the national level ever. I never want that conversation on the national level. I don't even want to fucking have it. I don't.
Well, because then, this is actually going on in Oregon on the state level right now. They're trying to pass cap and trade, and they've already passed a couple laws that exclusively hurt the rural parts of the state because, they're trying to pass, gas taxes, and they passed a gross receipts tax, and a lot of these laws hurt rural people the most because rural people drive the most. They have trucking companies. They have to pay the most when a gas tax is passed. Gross receipts tax hurt things like the lumber industry and anybody that deals in any industry with volume.
Right.
And it's not really going to hurt the artisan craft beer industry of Portland so much because they don't deal in as much volume as the timber industry.
Right.
And so just because one side has control doesn't necessarily mean they should force their views down the throats of the rest of the state. And I think that's the point you're getting at. But
I don't want urban.
Exactly.
I don't want the urban areas of our country to continue to dictate what happens across the United States. It's a recipe for fucking disaster. It really is. And I think that's what we really like. We're looking at the left and the right coast, and they continue to try to define what happens through, the heartland and different areas in the United States. And I think, that's one of the reasons why, our business is based in Utah, Texas, and Tennessee. I'm not going to go to California. We had a choice. You know what I mean? We could go to California. We could go to some of these states. We're not going. There's no fucking way. They outvote us. They outvote us. Like everywhere when we look at these different states and different cities. From my perspective, I mean, progressives ruin every one of these cities. Regardless, it doesn't matter.
Look at California. There are more people leaving California that are moving in for the first time in history. They're going to lose at least a couple congressional seats after the census. I mean, you have examples.
Really, they're losing seats, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oregon's actually probably going to get one of them, and maybe even Texas might get another one too.
Right.
But there's just so many examples of their types of society failing because California.
Nobody admits that. That's the thing. Is like when you try and present that and say, "Hey, look at how fucked up San Francisco is right now. This is the mayor's fault. This is Feinstein's fault. This is your guys' fault. It's your policies you put in place." Nobody's holding accountable, not even the citizens at this point.
I mean, it's the entire state of California, and that's what I mean. It's like San Francisco and L.A. basically control the entire state of California. Right. They're ruining it for everybody, even the farmers that live in the Central Valley and Northern California. And a lot of these people can't just move out of the state because they're tied to their land or whatever.
Well, they're tied to their profession. I mean, they're tied to work and they have their lives. They built their lives there. I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know why people who left California for these kinds of reasons would then move to a state like Oregon, Texas, or Nevada and then continue to vote for the same things that they fled. It does not make any sense.
I don't know either. And it baffles me that we deal with it with Austin continuing to grow. And that's kind of been a perpetual conversation with all of us. Is every time you find an urban area, you find high density progressive views, and they're continuing to vote. Here's a great example. Utah and Idaho. I spend a ton of time in both those cities, in states, I should say, states, not cities, but. Salt Lake's very liberal. They have a LGBTQ mayor, but the rest of the state is really conservative. It's a great example of what's happening across the United States. It's urban areas are progressive, Democrat. The rest of it, it's the blue and red map, right? It's like blue and red, and I don't understand why we continue to do this over and over. When we look at this, it's like, man, we're getting outvoted. And it's pretty easy to see that we have to change some policies to continue to try to do some gerrymandering that actually works for rural values a little bit better. And I know that we try, right? I know that conservatives try, but we just have to do a better job.
There's a movement going on in the state of Oregon where they want the entire eastern part and part of the southern part to secede from the state of Oregon and become part of the state of Idaho.
Is that real?
I thought
that was a joke.
That is happening. I'm not sure if it's happening, but there is a huge movement, and they're holding, rallies and things like that, and they're trying to gain support. I mean, I've looked at it a little bit as far as what they would actually have to do legally to make it happen, and it's a very, very long shot. But I mean, even talking about people leaving the state of California.
If you get the votes, you get the votes. I mean,
they're not going to get the votes in Oregon. Right. Is my point.
Yeah.
But I just mean that it's tough seeing all of these people, leave California, move to other states. Even a lot of conservatives now are starting to leave Oregon and move to Idaho.
Yeah.
But it's like, instead of just running from all of these policies, at some point we need to stand up and fight back. And I mean, that's part of why I'm running as well. But I just wish people would have more of that mentality, period, because we're losing, I guess, conservatives and Republicans, we're losing the culture war nationwide. And it starts at, school board, city council. I mean, even in Republican areas, most of those positions are held by Democrats. And that's what we as Republicans need to start doing better, is instead of trying to defend our position, we need to start going on the attack and start moving the needle in the other direction.
I think the only way you do that is by you have to start putting, or at least encouraging, conservative educators within the school district. I mean, education profession just in general is so, overwhelmingly Democrat. Like,
Yes.
that
On all levels.
we have such a pitched battle, and that's where I see, like, we've lost that, right? We capitulated the ground however many years ago. We capitulated that ground within the teachers unions and not being able to fight back and not hold people to task. So our kids are being educated by a bunch of fucking socialists. And when we look at a lot of the education system, specifically when we look at universities around the United States, they're not just Democrats. There are a lot of socialists within those positions. We lost that battle, right? We lost it. And that's where I'm like, well, how do we go back? We can't go back, but how do we gain momentum within the education system? Because we've obviously, if you've eaten the fucking socialist shit and you've decided to be, a socialist or a communist, whatever, ist you want to describe that as, we're not going to win you back very easily. Like, that's, you're a dyed-in-the-wool Marxist, and a lot of these professors are fucking Marxists.
Well, and there's a reason that young people tend to be more liberal, and as they grow older, they tend to be more conservative, and that's because they realize that socialism doesn't work. They start a business. They realize that taxes aren't good for growing businesses, and they just change their mind. And we have to start changing people's minds, not just on...
Well, it's once they experience it for themselves.
Exactly.
That's why I said, like, you may have plenty of socialists and Marxist educators out there in these universities that are preaching this to young people, but what happens when you show up to their house and start taking their gas out of their car? Are they just going to openly let you do that? Like, people, once this stuff starts hitting the doorstep, you start kind of changing your mind. Oh wait, no, I don't want that.
I think it's a lot of it is, I mean, in theory, a lot of it is it's social acceptance too within academia. You're almost ostracized as a conservative.
Yeah, we've done like, and it starts at Hollywood. Like, most people in Hollywood go completely anti-Trump and anti-right because they have to. Because
you have to.
You have to. If you want to work, they have made it abundantly clear that if you are on the right side, you're not going to work.
Journalism as well. And that's, of course, between Hollywood and journalism, that's where we get all of our information and most of our ideas nowadays. And, I mean, it's just almost brainwashing at this point. And people think of these concepts, as good ideas. We should help people. We should be able to pay for their medical care. We should be able to pay for their education. And that's all great in theory. But when you actually look at the reality of where do you get all this money to pay for all this medical care and you pay for all of this free schooling, you have to take it from working people. And if they're taxed at that rate, what is the point of even working? And then the whole system just breaks down. And that's exactly what happens in communist and socialist countries all over the world. See, at some point you have to say, this is where we draw the line, enough is enough, because once it gets past that line, the entire system's going to break down.
And that's when the system starts to fail, it has to be enforced, right? It has to be enforced, and the only way you can enforce it is with re-education and violence. Like, that's the only way it continues to work. You have to have a hegemonic, single-point control mechanism over every aspect, and that's where people don't quite understand it. You can't have freedom and socialism. You can't have those two things. They do not coexist in the same ecosystem. They do not. In order for it to work, it has to be enforced with a massive amount of force. And that's the thing where I continue to debate these things with liberals, where they'll say, I think, I think that education for all, right? I just had this conversation the other week.
The Education Forgiveness
Everybody
Act.
should get a free education. I'm like, that sounds great, doesn't it? But when everybody wants to fucking go to college and be an artist and nobody wants to contribute to a real economy where money is actually being made or real things are being made, like that's awesome that everybody wants to be a fucking, an oil painter that, paints
Banksy.
that
Yeah, but here's another.
that you don't make anything.
Yeah.
But that's happening right now, and that's why the
Exactly.
trades are being paid much more than people with 4-year degrees, is because we went too far. We started educating too many people in degrees that there aren't really jobs for, and people ignored the trades, and now they're getting paid more.
Because
Yeah,
you told them propaganda.
Like
That's
you
what happens
said-
in a free market.
You said
You
when
and
you
I-
go, universities have fed this line of shit to generations of kids because they want the money, which is come to college, you're going to have a higher rate of income. Okay, but then you take out a bunch of debt, and then you go get your art degree in 6 years, and the only thing that you can do after 6 years is wait tables. You're not going to have a high rate of income.
No,
That's
because
all you're going to
in
be able to
debt.
do.
Oh, you and I
so
were
then your
passing
welder
that.
or your
Yeah.
pipe fitter or the guys that are like they look down on because they've done it my
Yes.
entire life. My
Yeah.
dad was a logger, and every one of these academics would look down on my family and my uncles, my aunts, everyone else.
Oh.
Like, oh, I've got a degree in this, and it's like, yeah, that's
you did
great.
homework.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's made
the
up.
pencils you're using are
Read
farmed
this book
somewhere.
and write a paper that serves no purpose.
Well, for
That
the
goes in
record,
a
I think
fucking shredder.
education is important. It just has to be in a degree that's useful. And colleges have just become diploma
Well,
factories.
you and I were
They don't
sharing
even
that
educate.
meme recently.
I don't
about
even know if education is important.
the
at this point.
Egyptian study.
Like I want to say that it's like the education they're receiving is not directly equivalent to making them
Money,
wise
yeah.
or contributing individuals to an overall society where we're making our country better. And I
Exactly.
mean,
I know what
obviously,
he's
when we employ 218 people today, and I continue to talk to kids where they're like, "Oh, I'm going to go to college." I'm like, "I don't know if you need college." And when I say I would discourage you from going to college, and they'll say, "Why?" I'm like, you need to go learn a trade.
a skill.
Why?
A skill.
Why? Because you have to have a means in order to make money. Then, if you want to go get a degree in philosophy or history,
All that dumb shit.
or you want to go be a mechanical engineer, fantastic. Finish that off. Then it continues to develop your intellect, where you can pursue something that you're not only passionate about, but where you can have some form of skill that is a direct contribution to society, and it allows you to pay your fucking bills.
Yes.
But if you just go get your history degree, hey dog,
No, that was that.
Yeah.
expect
that
to be
you-
poor for a long
You
time.
and I were sharing back and forth. That said, my friend has a master's in Egyptian studies and is going back for their PhD because he can't get a job, and now they're going to teach other people Egyptian studies.
Exactly. But that's the exact point, though, is that people that get a lot of these degrees, I mean, say you go and get a philosophy degree and you're now a PhD in philosophy, the only job you have is really to teach other people philosophy, which really doesn't
It
produce
caps.
anything. And that's
Yeah.
great. But, I mean, at the end of the day,
Just a cog in a fucking stupid
these
system. at that
people
point.
that are teaching other people whatever subject have never actually worked in the real world, so there's
No.
a disconnect. Much like with politicians who have never held a
Correct.
real job,
Right.
you're politicians making decisions for the entire country, and a lot of them have never held a real job or never worked with their hands, so they don't really understand how the other half lives.
No, like Joe Biden, has he ever had a real job? He definitely hasn't in the last 50 years. I think he's been in Senate, at least when I say I think his first Senate was 1975, 2 years before I was born. Is when he came to Washington. What the fuck does that guy know about real life?
Nothing.
He knows nothing about real life. Knows nothing about the common plight of America. He's completely
Yeah, but where was
detached.
this disconnect? Because I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I have being on the Senate floor and the House of Representatives recently and seeing how this works. Like, what it seems is you are elected to reflect your district in the
Absolutely.
decisions that you make in Washington. But what we see nowadays is people like AOC and all these people that are up there spewing their own opinion, not what their district wants. AOC kicked out a company that was going to provide the tens of thousands of jobs in her district, did she even put that over to them to say, hey, do you guys want this or do you not want this? And why isn't that happening from our representatives? It seems like we've gotten lazy and extremely disrespectful. Like, it's like once you become a congressman or congresswoman or they're like and if you see how these people, these people are acting like with Nancy Pelosi tearing the State of the Union in half, like, because who's her boss? You know, she doesn't have to report to anybody. So now I can act however I want. I can ruin a ceremony. She's
gonna win re-election no matter what she does.
Yeah,
because that's how liberal her district is.
Right.
But it's just like there's no accountability over there, and even then, we aren't pointing out failures. It seems like once you become a politician, you can fuck everything up, and nobody even holds you accountable.
But I think that's kind of like the politics just in general, right? In American politics, I don't know. I think it's probably getting better. Like, I mean, I see hope, especially some of the new Congress people, congressional, whatever. What do you say?
Whichever.
Yeah.
Congress
so
transitions.
I mean, I see it getting better to a certain degree. I look at it and I look at the last, several decades, and I look at, these policies. For instance, if you're not willing to do, be a globalist, you're a fucking racist, or you're xenophobiac, right? Where, okay, but national security is a real issue. If you don't want if you don't want open borders, you're a racist. It's this knee-jerk reaction narrative to, if you believe in the Second Amendment, you're a racist. If you believe there should be a wall, you're a racist.
Nobody does their own homework anymore. Yeah.
Right? It's just, everything is this default answer to anything conservative. It's always, you're a racist. That's their only answer. And then you end up
there's no
defending that you're not a racist.
You're not even talking about the issue at this point.
Right. So it's like, no, hey, let's really talk about legal immigration. Let's talk about, what is a positive immigration policy for the United States, and maybe it might have to vary based on state. It can't be just federal, right? There's so many different variables to this where you can't just continue to be duped into these conversations with progressives where their only answer is you're a racist. Or, if you want to start logging in your congressional district now, you want to just kill all the trees and clear cut everything, and you're a capitalist greedy pig that wants to ruin the environment, and you're in the pocket of big corporate lumber.
Oh no they got me.
Right? But I mean, that's got to be what they're
that's what they're going to say, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, the average person can understand these issues. They're not very complicated.
They're not.
I think we don't give the average voter enough credit. I mean, most people can look outside and realize that there's more forest fires every year in California and Oregon than there were in the past.
Right.
And there's got to be a reason for it. It's probably not global warming. It's probably the fact that we don't manage our forests anymore.
And we
don't put out forest fires.
Are we putting that on Gavin Newsom's shoulders, though? That's another thing. There's no accountability. Like, they straight up, these fires that happened in 2019, they straight up came back and said, this is because the governor of California stopped us from doing our forest restoration and all the things that they do. Like, why isn't that guy being strung up? He's at fault because the decisions he made directly impacted the state's fucking security.
Right.
That there's no accountability.
Right. I mean, I think you're right. There isn't really any accountability. I mean, we invaded Iraq in 2003. We spent trillions,
7
plus,
trillion,
whatever, on the premise that they had, chemical weapons. 3,800 people died and multiple different, injuries. When we look at that, there's an entire administration. Not one of them had ever been to war, from Rumsfeld to, GW to, Cheney. None of them had ever been to war. So it's super easy for those guys just to make decisions.
Fuck
Be like,
it,
hey,
let's
yeah,
go to war.
fuck it, go to war. Let's send a bunch of dudes out there, and let's transfer a massive amount of wealth from taxpayer into the military-industrial complex. We're not making the United States any safer. There's no stabilizing Iraq at that point. Iraq was relatively stable.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, like a guy like Saddam Hussein probably kept a pretty good fucking
Kept a tight ship
grip
over
on it.
there.
Nor am I saying that you agree with me in these statements, because they're he's not. I'm saying
I think I do, actually. No, I we just shouldn't be messing in other countries' business. I mean,
yes, Iraq wasn't coming over here and fucking
yeah,
with us.
exactly.
no.
They had
But
nothing
where's the
to do with
accountability?
9/11.
To your point,
Exactly.
one of the largest transferences of wealth in American history, from the taxpayer to the military-industrial complex, on false premise,
Weapons
that
of
were
mass
built
destruction. Yeah.
on literally things that were mined within the intelligence community. Thousands of lives lost. Where's the accountability?
But if the average person smokes
None.
a joint
There's
or doesn't
none.
pay their taxes, they go to jail.
Yeah. But hey, Hillary can have her own private servers.
Mhm.
No accountability.
Hey, no accountability. Like any one of us
Would have been
would have
fried.
been fired, kicked out, like you name it in the military. There's a different standard. There's a ruling class, and there's the rest of us. There's a ruling class, and there's the rest of us. And what happens is that when people go to Washington, they're part of the ruling class. And I think that's the big thing where I continue to go back to is like, please, as a society, can we just have the conversation where, when you isolate control and power, there is corruption. And if we continue to lobby and throw these issues up to the federal level, you will continue to have these same problems. And 20 years. We've been in war in Afghanistan for 20 fucking years. Mm-hmm. We're going to pull out of Afghanistan after 20 years of war.
And what do we have to show for it?
What do we have to show for it? I'll tell you what. Northrop Grumman has to show for it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what Raytheon has to show for it. Halliburton. Their shareholder prices have gone fucking incredibly high. When we look at it, when I look at the cost effectiveness, even just the wars that we fight, and people say, but if you're not a globalist, you're a racist. I'm not a racist. I just don't think that we should be meddling in other countries.
We don't even do that well.
Huh?
We don't even do the wars that we fight well. We don't do them efficient.
No, because they're built to slowly trickle the taxpayers
the cost
from their money.
Yeah, the cost of
that's the way they're built.
F-16, we could have 35 A-29s that provide more safety and coverage for troops.
They're not, but that's the thing, is that you can just look at Afghanistan the way that it was fought for 20 years, and you'll know why it was fought the way that it was. It's
War is a Racket by Smedley Butler, right?
Yeah.
War is a Racket.
Yeah.
And it was a slow trickle. Low-intensity conflict is a means for us to not get too worried about all the bodies that are coming home. It's because that's another reason why you can't see that on the news. You can't see the body bags coming home and the American flags drift over the coffins. Low-intensity conflict keeps us involved, keeps the millions of dollars per day keep flowing from the taxpayer into corporate interest, and it keeps going year after year after year. And the real winner in that entire fucking war was the military-industrial complex. That was the real war. That was the real winner in Afghanistan. They won.
Yep. They did.
Eisenhower warned us.
And, Feinstein's husband is a major shareholder in Halliburton, so
yeah,
it's all in a loop.
They're all smoking cigars together.
It's all the same group of people. I mean, you could look at even the bailout in 2008, with TARP and things like that. They took American taxpayer dollars, didn't ask anybody, and just gave it to big banks who then didn't change any of their policies and continued to make the same mistakes. It's just JT's right. We need to hold people accountable. We need to vote out reps that aren't doing their job. We need to vote in people. I mean, I've met a lot of congressmen and a lot of politicians recently, and a lot of them are brilliant people.
Right.
A lot of them are good people, but I think the single most important factor when you elect a politician, especially a representative like a congressman, they need to have their heart in the right place.
Right.
Because they're representing their district. They can be the
Not
smartest person.
Not their interests.
Exactly.
Yes.
They can be the smartest person in the room, but if they're representing their own or their own interests over their district or someone else's interests over their district, it doesn't matter how smart they are. You just need someone with a good heart who knows why they're running and what they want to accomplish, and that can then go accomplish it and retire and get out of the way and make way for somebody new. Because I'm running against a guy who's been in office for 33 years. That's longer than I've been alive.
Years.
That's it's time for him to go.
Like that
Time for him
is
to go.
absolute insanity.
Yes, it is.
33 fucking years. Like there's no way a person should hold office that fucking long.
Not
doesn't
not
make
one
any
bit.
sense.
You can't stand on. There's no argument that you can give.
I think it should be like the military. You either get promoted or you get out.
Yeah.
If you're in Congress for 10 years and you can't make it to
Yeah,
the
higher
Senate
tenure,
or president
boom,
by then,
out.
You're done.
There should be some type of incentive for guys to leave. Like, great, you need to be there for X, and then you're out. Now, granted, term limits, depending, like those can be, that depending on how you're defining them and what you're doing with them, like the who knows what the right amount of time is, right? But I just can't imagine being in a job. And a job can't be that fucking difficult if you're in it for 33 fucking years.
And you're still doing it poorly.
Like, Joe Biden is what, 78 years old?
Something like that.
Yeah. Because I see every corporation in America that's publicly traded that does over $1 billion in revenue, they're all scrambling to hire a 78-year-old to run their business. They're scrambling for the 78-year-old. And that's the insanity that I'm looking at going,
This is who you want to be president.
This is who you want to be president? Okay. A 78-year-old that's already been in the seat as far as a VP. He's already like a half-wit as far as like I can tell. It's just like in general. But we're going to put him in. Okay. That sounds like a good time. If you did that in any major publicly traded company in the United States, if you put a 78 in the seat, a 78-year-old male, female, doesn't matter, in the seat of Ford Motor Company,
you'd
what
have
do you think
a
their
massive
stock price
shareholder.
would be?
Yeah, you'd
With
have
as many gaffes that this guy's had.
I don't even like making fun of Joe Biden for that kind of stuff, because honestly, I think it's serious. Like, I think he honestly is getting dementia or something.
I think he is too.
Something's going on. It's not even funny at this point. I mean, he should probably seek some help.
Probably just sit down, Joe. Sit down.
Go to your rocking chair.
Yeah.
You and Hunter can ride off into the sunset with your Ukrainian millions, and rocking your rocking chair.
Horses, yeah. Fuck.
Ride horses and, and not pay
the
alimony
VP.
or
Like,
child
is it really
support.
Is it ego that much?
He could probably start like an orphanage or something. That seems like something Joe Biden would really.
Yeah, pet a bunch of little kids.
Yeah.
I think a lot of politicians do it for the ego, though, and I think that's one of the worst things for the health of the country as well. You've got a bunch of egotistical people arguing about who can screw each other over the most. I mean,
it's sociopathic. It's all really sociopathic.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the federal government having so much power, is you have these people that are each trying to represent their district, but the problem is once something becomes federal law, it's then forced down the throats of all the other districts that didn't want it. It's the same thing with, San Francisco making the policy of the state of California. It's the same problem that we're dealing with in Oregon coming out of Portland to the rest of Oregon.
The Portland mayor is probably one of the biggest morons I've ever. I follow him closely, and it's just like, what is going on?
Why do you follow the mayor? Planning on moving to Oregon?
What? No, because he allows the Antifa shit to go on down there, and he is the one that put out to. And I started following him because police officers from Portland started reaching out, saying, "Hey, do you know what goes on up here? Like what we're told? Antifa is like given carte blanche. They can assault people. They can hit people with fucking crowbar.
I don't know.
We're not allowed to touch them.
I don't know how they find police officers to do that job in Portland. I wouldn't do it.
A lot of them have talked about
else.
how they're shelling out. The retention is horrible right now, and then there's a lot of talks of major striking that's going to go on up there because the city doesn't have their backs. Like,
No.
like
But
the
that- but
the
that's-
mayor of Portland was the one that induced the bill to disarm the police officers. You didn't see that?
Yeah,
Said-
but that's the entire. That's up and down both coasts. It's I don't know if something comes in maybe from like the air. Maybe it's like
the sea air.
that comes in, and it just
Yeah.
makes
This is like
politicians
whale
and public
breath or something
officials
like
just
that, yeah.
dumb as fuck. I don't know. That's Seattle too. I mean, they
Yeah,
have a
well, I
they
mean,
have
Seattle's being
fucking
ruined.
communist.
Well, it's like
property. The big thing with Seattle is the authorization for people to homeless people allowed to claim domicile in a tent
Yeah, I
on
love
your
that.
land.
No, you can
Like,
park.
yeah.
You can just park on the street in front of your house
and call it a
and
house.
call it your domicile.
And now you're not.
And now
allowed, they're
you
not-
can't call the cops to get you their car
See,
taken away.
I'm okay with that. Let Seattle do whatever the hell they want, but don't force it on the state of Washington. That's
Oregon.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
or
Seattle.
Oregon, but Seattle's in Washington.
I'm okay with that
But-
too because I moved out and just sold my condo.
Yeah.
And I'm totally fine with that too. Like I don't need to go back there, and I won't really. I don't have any desire to. Just don't
Yeah.
move out of Seattle and try to do it in Spokane.
Exactly, because you can move out of a city even
Yeah.
if you have to work in that city. You can live outside of the city and commute. But once they start
Right.
doing it to entire states, that's when it becomes a real problem. Because people moving states and fleeing states for more politically similar states to their own point of views, then that becomes a real problem. 'Cause
Unless
then
it's
people just-
Idaho, I think that all the conservatives
just
should move to Idaho.
rally around Idaho.
And I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there.
And then we'll just start pushing our borders
Yeah.
via
That would be badass.
annexation. We get
Activate
everybody
the
to
Idaho
move.
National Guard
Yeah.
and invade a section of Oregon.
Yeah, and then we
Hey,
just
dog.
start taking. We
Yeah,
just
we
start
just start
taking
taking
land.
that.
I
mean,
can't
Idaho.
comment on this.
Idaho has both an A-10 and a Strike Eagle squadron, so we could
we
move
could definitely
we could
take some
move some
ground in
needle.
Washington.
And you know what? Texas would be a friend, and Texas has the 1st Armored Division, so we got tanks.
We could rename Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming like Idaho,
Wyoming.
Idaho, Wyoming, just a
Idaho,
super
Wyoming.
state.
Yeah, super state
I'm not sure.
of awesome.
And just put a fence around it.
I'm not sure if you'd have to wage war with anybody because I think the militaries of all of these surrounding states would probably be on your
Yeah.
side too.
That's what I mean. We
That's
could get
true.
the
You could
tanks from
roll
Texas.
Utah into that if you just rolled up all those states.
Well, that's
just put
always
a fence
the joke.
around them.
You know, California jokes about, or they talk about how they want to leave the United States, but California doesn't have any defense system. They've got a Globemaster, a C-17 squadron, and some C-130s. Like, they don't have a military. The tanks are in Texas. The attack aircraft are in Idaho.
All
Right.
of Oregon's pretty much infantry, so we'll help
Yeah, I
you
think
guys
that's
out.
Washington too.
Yeah,
I
but
think
you know what?
Washington's
That doesn't-
infantry.
It doesn't really matter how much infantry you have if we're rolling in with tanks
That's true.
and aircraft.
I like this plan where we
Yeah.
just start putting border walls internally,
Yeah.
and then making a super state.
And then taking land
Yeah.
with force.
My campaign manager looks
Sorry.
very confused right now.
He's like, your campaign manager is like, this is the dumbest fucking conversation
Oh, damn it.
he's ever heard.
Pull the plug.
Oh.
Well, if people want to support you in this campaign
thank
endeavor, where can they find you?
Yeah.
How can they help?
Our website is alek4oregon.com.
Ooh.
That's ALEK 4oregon.com.
FOR.
FOR
Got it.
spelled out.
AlekForOregon.com.
And then, yes, we have a Facebook page as well, Alek Skarlatos, not my personal. Please don't send me a friend request. We have a political
Well,
page
I
for
did.
that.
I wanted to.
You can follow my Instagram. That's okay.
All right.
But yeah, we're just trying to.
Donation links are up.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
We're just trying to get support, get some money into this campaign, so we can make part of Western Oregon
And,
Republican.
Evan and I are trying to get you elected too, so we have a congressman that owes us a favor.
Oh,
Got you in our pocket now, but
Yeah, we do. That's our motive.
Uh-oh.
I'm
Actually-
beholden.
Yeah. Not really. It's good to see you, man. I'm
Yeah,
glad
thanks
that
for
you
having
showed
me,
up.
We were glad that you could make it out for this.
Sorry you got roped into this show where just a bunch of idiots are talking about politics. That's kind of, good for us, bad for you. Apologize.
It was okay.